Well, good morning again for those of you who are just joining in, and for those who started with us, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Rita.
How are you doing? I'm super fine.
Okay. Hope you had a very wonderful night, though.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And it's time for us to now take a look at what is coming in from the world of the SMB across borders. The international news headlines. News, not headlines, I would say news. International information.
Very, and we're going to kickstart it with Ethiopia and Kenya, where Ethiopia moves to allow entry of Kenyan banks around there. Now, Ethiopia has constituted a committee to liberalize the bank sector, taking a major step in opening up the door for Kenyan leaders at KCB Group to set up operations in populous nation. Now, the commitment has already started work amidst Ethiopia's half-a-century-old financial code. Local reports added that meaning a long-awaited easing of restriction of foreign and also banking sectors making an investment in Ethiopia has inched closer. A new code guiding the country's banking sector will allow the opening up of financial sector. The head of committee was quoted saying that Business Daily learning and commitment work plans state the first draft of the Financial Service Code as a must be ready by December 2022. And led by Almanet, the Legal and Justice Service Division State Minister at Ethiopian Ministry of Justice, the committee convened at Hyatt Regency Hotel around March 17, that was last week. The new code is necessitated to cope up with the new direction the economy is ongoing, and this will include capital market and opening up of the economy of foreign players. And Almanet there was quoted saying, Ethiopian publication, the reports coming in from there. The new Financial Service Code will determine engagement modalities of foreign banks in Ethiopia's financial industry. The latest development looks set to excite top Kenyan banks such as Equity Group, KCB Group, which have expressed ambitions to run fully fledged operations in the neighboring country. At present, Ethiopia has 18 commercial lenders, 2 of which are state-owned according to the central bank around there. And Kenyan banks have had already sites on the Ethiopian market for years due to country's huge population. As we conclude on this one, less than 15% of Ethiopians have access to bank accounts, highlighting the opportunity for foreign lenders to come in. And KCB opened a representative office in Addis Ababa around 2015 to have it ready in the market when the opportunity run fully fledged banking operations will be arising there. And this followed around 2012, dealing allowed Kenyan's bank to open representative offices but barred full banking operations in Ethiopia, including lending and deposit taking. And you realize that the local lenders can now generate deposit, lend directly to Ethiopian companies and households, but they are conducted, or they have to conduct research assessment to allow them lending. This information is coming in from the Kenyan headquarters. So we're looking at how Ethiopia and Kenya are getting into closer collaborations in regards to the banking system, where Ethiopia is allowing entries, Kenyan entry banks, to help its people also attain Kenyan services as well, because you know there are other Kenyans living in Ethiopia vis-a-vis here as well. You will realize that demand is always there, and what is in the market sometimes might not test preferably for most of the people, Joram. So that is why we have got to always be diverse at some point. So kudos to Ethiopia moving to allow the Kenyan entries into their country. And congratulations to Kenya as well.
Kenya is striking a lot of business lately, and when you look at also the performances of their banks and performances of theirs, you can clearly see that they are clearing some businesses, and this is actually happening when the president is actually bowing out, because he won't be back into the seat in August, as Kenya will be having the poll elections. So I think he wants to leave a remarkable
history of livelihood improvement, sustainability. That's a good thing.
And still with Kenya, we are now looking at the Equity Bank of Kenya, whose profit nearly doubles to $344 million. So when you clearly look at this, still we're with Kenya. Why we're saying Kenya is actually making big rounds and big situations in business. Kenya's biggest bank, Equity Group, nearly doubled its net profit for the year ended December 31st, 2021 on account of a more than five-fold reduction in loan loss provisions, as well as growth in interest income from investments in government securities. The regional lender, which is listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange, recorded net profit growth of 98% to 39.17 billion Kenyan shillings. That is roughly $343.59 million from the $19.78 billion. That is a very huge which because if you're from 19.78 billion Kenyan shillings up to 39.17 billion Kenyan shillings, which had been recorded. So its provisions for bad loans dropped to 5.8 billion by 5.84 billion Kenyan shillings. And that is up from the down from the 93.65 billion Kenyan shillings. And this helped by a 40% growth in interest income on government securities to 29.45 billion Kenyan shillings from the 20.93 billion Kenyan shillings, and a 22.64% growth in interest income on loans to 63.81 billion Kenyan shillings. From the 52.03 billion Kenyan shillings. Its stock on the Nairobi bourse rose by 0.49%, and the group's net interest income increased by 24.79%, and while non-interest income grew by 15.76 billion Kenyan shillings, up to 44.57 billion Kenyan shillings. And when you look at this, they have strengthened their business model to achieve an embedded shared value concept in their twin engine of social and economic aspirations and deliverables. They have scaled social and environment impact investments in capacity building and enhancement through education, health, and entrepreneurship training. That is according to James Mwangi, who is the group's chief executive. And he actually said that they've strengthened their participation in formalizing and integrating the informal sector in the real economy with the formal supply chains and the ecosystems of agriculture, micro, small, and medium enterprises. The board recommended a final dividend of Kenyan shillings of about 3 Kenyan shillings, that is $0.02 per share, subject to shareholders' approval after a 2-year freeze. In customer deposits, they actually had an increase of 29%. And then, while the loan book expanded by 23%, so you can clearly see that the Equity Group is making a lot of sales in there, or making some good profits in Kenya. Equity has operations in Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and South Sudan. The lender is bullish on a sustained profit trajectory after diversifying into a new line of businesses, including trade financing, insurance, and derivatives to boost its particular goals.
Very well. And away from Kenya, we cross to the DRC, where plastic pollution cuts out electricity around there. And now among the rolling hills around the southern tip of the majestic Lake Kivu, huge layers of plastic wastes ride the water and block turbines of the largest hydroelectric plant in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The Ruzizi Dam is populated by thousands of bottle, cans, and other objects thrown into the lake, which is stretching around 90 kilometers, that is around 56 miles, along the border between DR Congo and Rwanda. Since the lake flows towards Ruzizi River, all the waste thrown into comes here little by little according to Livieni Chinzungu, the production manager at the dam's power station, when he was telling journalists around there. The mountainous terrain, the rainy climate around lakeside Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu province, did not help or doesn't help around that particular situation. And the rainwater crisis, the west into the lake and into the river, according to the engineer of the National Electricity Company there in southern Kivu, was also telling and highlighting for journalists. And Chinzungu says pails of waste can reach a depth of around 14 meters, almost 46 feet. Drivers clean riverbed to keep debris from plunging into the turbine there, but the waste get tapped down in the area as they deprive the power off. Now other employees clean the surface using barges there, but they have no jobs around 30. They have been doing the job for 13 years, and every day there is garbage that they have to be cleaning up, but this seems to have no change around there. So what impact does it have onto the river, since the river now is since the dispose of waste there is now affecting electricity? Let us dive down into the impact it has got onto that one. But it's not enough. Of the 4 units in the plant that was damaged by debris at the end of January, and it is still down. The impact is very huge. They have got a deficit of around 6.3 megawatts out of 30 total megawatts that they must produce, not only for South Kivu, but also neighboring North Kivu province for Burundi, as Chinzungu there was highlighting. But garbage also caused an alternator to fail around Ruzizi 2 power plant, about 25 kilometers south of Bukavu there. With the damage at both plants, they are now at 20 megawatts short, according to reports from Chinzungu there, and also highlighting that it has provoked many power outages in Bukavu and Uvira. Nicholas Mameme, who is a 29 collecting plastic waste around the lake, makes baskets, floors and stools around the and also nightstands there. So we're talking about DRC Congo, the waste management problem that is arising there. It's not only just affecting the environment, but now, Jeremy, it has crossed to the extent of cutting the electricity off around the DRC Congo, because the linings or electricity linings, some of them are being now covered up with poor waste management, and in turn this is losing when electricity wires are covered. You may not know that something is happening here, and this stands to be a risk for many people living around Kivu areas around near that particular lake. So let me hope the waste management, facilitations around DR is doing great. But from what we're looking at here, it seems not to be working. There are people who have been working on that particular issue for 13 years, but there seems to be no progress around Lake Kivu and the Ruzizi Dam.
I think it's also a warning to Uganda in terms of waste management when it comes to plastics. I've seen a number of companies here, industries, trying to actually lead the recycling process. But if at all we continue like this, is a good way to go, because this particular waste management may not affect our electricity like it is affecting electricity supply in the DRC, but in the long run affect our water. Because when you look at how the water levels and how the quality of Lake Victoria's water is, it is always worrying for anyone who goes there and have a glimpse of it. So it is a warning to us to also make sure that we have a proper way of disposing of these plastics.
And like you say, relatively, this is what is happening around the DR, because when the waste management crosses off to the water, and now we are seeing the water levels also being affected, and the dam, like Ruzizi Dam, the generation capacity reduces. Now they have been reduced at 20 megawatts. They are now at 15. So you can imagine the fate that it has got. So make sure as you take plastics on, make sure you also try to dispose it off effectively.
Well, okay, now let's turn our eyes to what is coming in from South Korea, as South Korea sued to stop deep sea gas pipeline, as the Aboriginal people from Northern Australia have filed a lawsuit aimed at stopping South Korea funding a proposed deep sea gas field. They say a 300-kilometer gas pipeline threatens their way of life and risks harming turtles near their Tiwi Island's home. The Barossa gas field, located in the seas north of Darwin, was partially approved by Australia's offshore energy regulator last week. The gas giant Santos plans to begin drilling wells in the next few months. As if the project is given full approval, Santos wants to construct an undersea gas pipeline alongside Bathurst Island, which is the westernmost island in the Tiwi archipelago. At its closest point, the pipeline will be 6 kilometers from the shores. As environmentalists say, the gas project risks damaging the Tiwi's pristine marine environment. Aboriginal groups from the Tiwi Islands, located in Timor Sea, north of Australia, say they were not properly consulted about the project. The legal challenge aims to prevent South Korea from lending approximately 950 million Australian dollars, which is 530 million pounds, to Santos via the state-owned Export-Import Bank of Korea and the Korea Trade Insurance Corporation. Lawyers filed an injunction in Seoul Central District Court on Wednesday under a law known as the Korean Civil Execution Act. It seeks to prevent potential damage either to the environment or to South Korea's future financial position when it comes to the investment fails by prohibiting the financing from going ahead. If the legal action is successful, lawyers say the financial viability of the entire project is greatly at risk, as Jikilaruwu Tiwi Island clan leaders, including Francisco Babui and Daniel Monkara, have accused Santos and the previous owner of the project, Konoko Phillips, of disregarding the islanders' concerns. So under the Australian law and in accordance with Aboriginal tradition, the Jikilarua clan is the owner of the sea country where the gas pipeline will go through. As the decision makers for the sea country, according to Monkara, who is an official in Australia, say that they released this to stop Barossa Gas Campaign Group to set up these gas pipelines in this particular one. Now, when you look at the wild frontier, environmental campaigners in Australia have long criticized the Barossa plan. They say that the proposed gas field and pipeline will damage the unique marine environment in the Timor Sea, including turtle nesting areas, and also the olive ridley sea turtles are the most common species that are actually nesting off the Tiwi Islands in Australia still. The Timor Sea is quite warm and shallow and muddy. It is actually dominated by spawns, not corals. There are over 900 species of spawns out there in the sea. Some of them are undiscovered, and they only mapped out about 10% in the area. So it's very much a wild frontier that we only need to actually think of. Those are statements coming in from some of the officials in there. The pipeline Santos proposes would pass through an area designated as a habitat protection zone in the Ocean Shoals Marine Park. Under the Australian government rules for management of marine parks, gas pipelines can be constructed within such zones under license. Those rules were approved by Australian Treasurer Josh Frydenbach when he was the Minister of Energy and Environment in 2018. So they're actually saying that when you build a gas pipeline across the seafloor, it's like building a railway line across the entire country.
And the tribe is on it there against development. You know, sometimes we tend not to think about some people's lives when even we need the development, and these particular tribes, you know, tribes coming out, owning and claiming that particular space where the pipeline is going to be passing. And this one also reminds me about the tree the tree that is in the middle where the road has got to pass, you know, around.
And they adopted to give them 150 million, and they said the spirits wanted 500.
And now government resorted to giving them 4 million shillings. But away from that, so you realize that there are some developments that are coming with just opportunities. I feel like sometimes it's, you know, people's tactics to just want government to compensate a huge amount than what we expect, and this in turn doesn't work out as we anticipated. So to me, I feel like the pipeline, because we have seen a number of developments, other countries taking on developments underwater in the middle of the ocean, but I understand that I tend to believe that government or Ministry of Energy, the energy authorities there, had got a way to try to mitigate all this. I don't know what your take is on it, but before projects come along, I know there is that strategy that entities have to lie fast to make sure we're going to pass a road here, we're going to make sure this and this happens to protect this. I don't know if that particular Aboriginal group, whether they knew that government had a strategy or even did not share with them.
Clearly, I think one of the reasons as to why they come out to strike on such situations is they realize that maybe this thing, once the gas pipeline passes their way, it may be difficult for their environment to survive, their surrounding. Because when you look at some cultures, by the way, they're very crucial when it comes to, they always put their cultures or traditions ahead of them.
Or they feel like that particular space, because
it belongs to them.
Yes,
and it's supposed to be very free.
Some people there say that, you know, that water, particular space, you know, have you been to hot springs?
Hot springs in Maberega Nyinamwiru.
It's in Sempaya. It's
yeah, that is
Maberega
Nyinamwiru, is it?
That's different. It's just closer.
That's
to
different,
that.
eh?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a different one. But you realize people around there are attached to certain areas, places. Others seek medicine from there. Others may be praising from there. It may be, you know, their godly thing. And here you are coming to just pass a pipeline there. That is why we are realizing resistance around there. But moving further, we now go to New Zealand, where the new New Zealand scraps outdoor masking. Some COVID vaccine mandates around there. COVID-19 still kills a lot of people, and now let us look at how New Zealand is trying to mitigate Omicron cases around there. The New Zealand is set to significantly relax its COVID-19 restrictions, with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern calling it a new beginning of the country. Now, the key changes include scrapping masking outdoors and easing vaccine mandates for employment in some sectors. New Zealand has got some of the world's toughest virus restrictions around there. But anger at some of these rules had led protesters to occupy the grounds outside Parliament, with some of the demonstrations even turning on to be violent. The vaccine mandates in particular were among some of the main grievances of protesters who stayed up to put more than 3 weeks in February. And public polls also showed increasing dissatisfaction with Ms. Jacinda's government. Now, under the new rules, which will come into effective from 4th April, double vaccination will no longer be required for people to work in education and police or defense force. However, employees in sectors like health, aged care, prisons, and board force staff will still need to be fully vaccinated. And Jacinda, they also said that the decision is to ease restrictions had not been as a result of protests, but then because of the models that showed up from the recent surges in the cases by Omicron variant, which was being eased in that particular country. Now the country saw a huge wave in the infections since Omicron took hold, with almost 21,000 new daily cases. As we conclude on this one, the evidence shows are coming off from Omicron peak, with cases around Auckland having already declined significantly, had a decline expected nationally by early April. And Jacinta was telling on the news that a new conference Wednesday, no, he was highlighting this at during last week in the news conference there. But about 95% of legal New Zealanders over the age of around 12 years have had at least 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. The Prime Minister there also highlighted, as a result of vaccination rate, the government did not expect to see a surge of cases once restrictions were eased.
And
now we're speaking about COVID-19 restrictions in some countries, and New Zealand here is coming out to highlight that some people do not need, the second doses. Some sectors do not need second doses, whereas other people need to fully be vaccinated, and this is causing protesters that why should it be like that?
Well, a lot of protests have been in there. There's also claims that some, remember, in Europe, by the way, in some of the European countries, some people were not given mandatory rules for vaccination. So it was actually if you feel you want to get vaccinated, you go for the jab.
You go
if
get
you feel
vaccinated.
you don't want to get it, then don't go. But then there were also other countries that had mandatory vaccination. If you're not vaccinated, you don't move out, you don't access any public.
We saw even last
anything.
time when we were speaking about the US, where
Yes, exactly.
they denied man, that is operation.
Because he was not
vaccinated.
So a lot of all these things do happen, and they're happening on the European continent. But clearly, when you also look at coming in from New Zealand, for example, because there are some protests that are coming up, so they've actually scrapped off the outdoor masking, whereby if they find you without a mask, you face a penalty. Now it's okay. So you've actually scrapped off some COVID vaccine mandates. Maybe clearly to give room for people. I think people come out and say it is my right. I saw some of the posters on the streets of New Zealand, people actually saying it is my right not to get vaccinated,
whether to get or not.
So remember, there is that drive of human rights.
But it doesn't mean COVID-19 is not there or it's not there anymore. According to the Prime Minister, he's calling that situation a new beginning in her country.
Oh, but I think, but I
we're
still
seeing
think
countries like Kenya going, China being under lockdown in some of its provinces. So
I don't
you
think
can
that
imagine.
can happen in China, for they are still even facing this situation. I hope that, because now the bigger questions are still on the point of the fact that some people feel them getting this vaccine will not entail anything, because at the end of the day, there are also chances that you will still get the vaccine,
And
or rather
we've
you will
seen
still
those
get the
reports.
virus. So with those reports, and the issue of human rights causes a lot of challenges to governments. Why? Because if it's a human right, then that means someone has the right to defend their body, and they have the right to choose what is right for them and what is wrong for them. So that is where the human rights
Unless you
activists
put
come
restrictions
through.
in their
Exactly.
sectors that you're not going to attain a health facility care, or you're not going to attain education if you're not vaccinated. If that is not there, you know what? People are just going to have control on themselves. And I feel like you say, should vaccination be, a will of freedom?
And vaccination in Uganda still has a lot of questions here. The reason being, some people haven't yet got their second jab. It even the time of getting that second jab already expired, and they are still waiting for it. And then also, there are people who were supposed to get that jab in, let's say, to get their very first jab, waiting for those doses, nowhere to be seen. People who are waiting for their booster jab. So still the drive of vaccination. However, we are still also getting some donations.
And the recent reports coming up, President Museveni met at least with the US ambassador to Uganda. So we expect very soon other doses of Pfizer vaccine.
Well, and with that, we're going into a break. But have you ever thought of agri-trade? As farmers have been urged to add value by branding, to add more. How do you brand your agricultural produce if you're a local farmer in Buikwe down there? Those are some of the discussions we do have after the break. Business tips and the business quotes on your way. Stick around.